Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us here for another episode, wherever in the world you're listening to us from, whatever platform you're listening to us on. As always, thank you guys so much for the support. Thank you for checking this episode out. Thank you for all the messages, all the emails, all the things that you've sent the show's way and my way personally. Keep that coming. Really looking forward to getting into this topic today, and I'm so happy that you're here joining us as we discuss it. I've had conversations in previous episodes that touch on aspects of this, but I've never had one specific, or at least this specific to this topic. And what we're going to talk about today is player nutrition and conditioning. And we're really going to focus on player health and making sure that our players are eating well, they're training well, they're physically healthy, they're mentally healthy, because of course, not only do we want that from our players on the basketball court, but as coaches, we're also trying to make sure that our players have those healthy habits that they're going to take with them beyond basketball when they're done playing. And so I think that this episode in particular just has value not only in the basketball context, but also just as us being leaders and coaches and people who are investing in our players' future. So this is going to be a lot of fun. Really excited to talk about this. I got my notepad already ready to take notes and learn from it, just like y'all listening are as well. I am very happy to be joined by a incredibly busy individual, as I'm sure he'll touch on. He is a high school girls basketball coach under the Michigan Basketball Academy umbrella on the women's side for the house basketball team, and he will be sure to explain what that is because I didn't know when he was first explaining it to me. Very happy to be joined by Coach Mike Dokter today. Coach, appreciate you being able to spend a little time talking to us today. How are you?
I'm doing great, Coach. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor to be able to share and have a conversation about the game that I and you and so many others listening, I'm sure, absolutely love. So this is exciting.
Yeah, really looking forward to having you on and picking your brain, Coach. So let's start with your basketball journey. Let's start with your coaching journey. The game of basketball, where did it take you and how did it ultimately lead you to the house basketball position that you're currently doing right now?
Yeah, it's an awesome question. So I've had a basketball in my hands since I was probably 3 years old. Just in terms of growing up with the sport. Our high school, the high school I went to, didn't have football, so basketball was the primary sport there. So it was just always something, grew up going to all of the high school games. When you went to the high school camps, like the players were like superheroes who were helping out, right? And I just remember like, oh my gosh, I get to learn from, Nate Carson and all these people, right, who are just amazing individuals. In my mind, they were my heroes. And so grew up playing the game. Was always tall for my age, was always a bigger kid until I hit my freshman year. And I stopped growing at about 6 foot, 180, 85, 170, somewhere in that range, depending on how hard I was working or whatever else. And so, I went from playing really center to point guard in about a year. And that caused a lot of stress and challenges and mental challenges. And I went from being one of the most dominating players to coming off the bench to not really playing that much at all, just in terms of how, my attitude was, quite honestly, what I felt I was entitled to, which was completely wrong. And being sort of frustrated with all the hard work that I felt I'd put in my entire life, which really didn't even scratch the surface of hard work. Sort of transitioned from, again, being that primary dominant player who was always taking the last shot, who was always taking the ball to the basket, to being sort of an afterthought and really getting passed on by other players and other kids who were working harder than I was and were more coachable than I was. And that's really sort of a life lesson that I kind of took on and try to, impart on my players too, is, it doesn't really matter how good you are today, right now, anything can happen and anything can change. And so, didn't play in college, stopped playing basketball for quite some time, and then started playing pickup basketball at the gym again, and really fell back in love with the sport really in my late 20s. And started playing my late 20s, to early 30s, realized I still had some gas in the tank a bit. Was able to play pickup basketball at a pretty decent level, and started taking care of myself more, really. I
Yeah.
wanted to play basketball. I wanted to play pickup basketball and realized that, okay, if you want to do this, you need to weight train a little bit. You got to watch what you eat. You got to lose some weight. You got to be able to keep up with these guys who, some of them played college ball, some of them played overseas. There's one guy that we played with in Grand Rapids who played in the CBA. He's 65 years old. He's still the best shot on the court.
That's incredible. Yeah.
It's amazing. And so he, wanting to keep up with those guys really drove me to be healthier in my own right, and continue to try to play at that level. And then moved and went through some life changes. Met my current wife and that family, and got away from really being fit and athletic in general. Gained a whole bunch of weight, a whole bunch of weight. Went from about 190 pounds to 255 pounds through a variety of different stressors and life changes and business failures and things like that. And then most recently, over the past year to a year and a half, have lost the majority of that weight and I'm back down to about 190 pounds, and became a certified nutritionist through the International Sports Sciences Association, and certified TRX suspension trainer, and also started coaching again with the Michigan Basketball Academy, the house team out of Muskegon, Michigan, the house girls basketball team. My daughter started getting an interest in basketball when I came into her life as her stepdad, and we started playing together. And she, started in fifth grade, sixth grade, and I helped out coaching her fifth and sixth grade team, and then was the assistant coach of their eighth grade team. And the organizer called me up and asked if I'd be interested in coaching a high school team. And it's been one of my dreams to coach, and really love helping, teaching. I always say I was created to help people fix problems and teach. And so when I had the opportunity to do that, I didn't even think twice about it. Thankfully, I have an amazing wife who is super supportive of everything that I choose to get myself into,
That's awesome.
and rolls with the punches well. So yeah, it's been a blessing. So that's probably a little bit longer answer, but that has been my journey to this point through basketball. So I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. I look forward to continuing to coach after my daughter graduates high school as well. So looking to really build a strong program there, make it a desirable program where girls can go not just to work on their basketball skills and the skill aspects of the sport, but also learn to grow mentally and emotionally, and become good leaders, and understand that there's more to the game than the actual functionality of the game.
That's incredible. There's so much to that story, right? There's so much, and uh just a lot of, it's so interesting how your basketball journey like has kind of taken, at least in terms of your playing days, how many like twists and turns were kind of involved. And I think that, I kind of relate to that. I was really tall. I was 6 foot, and then I stopped growing after that. So I went through the
Yeah,
same kind of experience that you did, where I was the tallest person in third and fourth grade, and then all of a sudden I think eighth grade hit, and all of a sudden people started getting taller than me, and I just stayed the same height. And so
yeah,
yeah, I went through that exact same journey as you did. No, that's really interesting. And I am definitely going to have to mention about how your own uh, fitness and nutrition journey has kind of led into to the work that you do now, because I'm sure you bring a lot of your own experiences, having gone through a big fitness journey to what it is you work with your players on. So that's really incredible. I want to talk about your work. And if you're quote unquote your other job, probably the one that takes up
sure.
more of your day, about being a leadership and management coach. And I wanted to ask specifically about things in general that you think coaches could be doing potentially to become better leaders of their team. What, and also I'll actually start with just that point in general, based on your experience in that leadership and management coach position. Any general advice you think about what coaches maybe can do and incorporate to become better leaders for their team?
Yeah, that's such an awesome question. The first thing I would say is I think when you're trying to create a relationship with a team, and specifically with the types of teams that I coach, right? So I'm coaching teams that have the potential of changing every single season.
Hmm.
If one of the girls develops really well, they may get called up to a different team within the Michigan Basketball Academy organization, and I might not have the chance to work with them anymore. So I think one of the things that's really big is just being vulnerable yourself as a leader. If you can open up and be vulnerable, that vulnerability builds a certain level of trust, and that is oftentimes extraordinarily hard to build that trust. Because if I'm going to attempt to really have an impact, and coaches, I mean, we all want to have impact on our players' lives. And it was National Coaches Day a few days
Hmm.
ago or a week ago or whatever. And I just think about all the great coaches and mentors that I've had in my life, both inside and outside of basketball. And the one common thing that they all had in common is A, they all wanted to serve, and B, they were not afraid to talk about their failures and the way that they screwed up and how they learned from that. And so I think when we can be vulnerable and just, get on the same level with our players and really just say, hey, look, I'm going to make bad decisions too. I'm going to make a bad call. You might take a bad shot. I might call a bad play. You might miss your assignment on defense, and I might yell a little bit more than I should than what's productive, right? These things are going to happen. We're all human. And really just getting to that open and honest spot so that your players really know that you're in it with them, and that the things in the direction that you're giving is coming from a place of love, and not a place of I know better than you. And that is really, to me, what I think can help build that camaraderie and that teamwork and that trust within an organization. The second thing I would say is get down and dirty with your team, right?
Okay.
Every single practice, I am in there doing the conditioning warm up drills with my team. When we do our warm up, we have a warm up routine that we go through every single practice, except the day after game days is different. We do more of a yoga stretching type of thing
Hmm.
to just get blood flowing. But really, before that, when we're warming up for practice, we start with up, downs, and burpees, and then we do a core exercise where we're always holding on to our ball. We're doing push-ups. We're doing some different agility and strength drills before we even get into any type of dribbling or any type of basketball functionality. And I do that exact same routine with them. And when we're doing 3-on-2, 2-on-1 drills, or when we're doing, full court drills, I'm out there playing with them. And that's not a reality for everybody, right? But for me, it was something that was extraordinarily valuable to just, again, continue to build that trust and lead by example, to say, look, I'm not just going to make you do this. I'm going to do this with you because I'm in this with you. I am your leader. I always look at it as there's a great book out there by Jocko Willink and another Navy SEAL called Extreme Ownership.
Okay.
Um, and it talks about the idea of taking full-on ownership of the failures and passing on ownership of the successes. So anytime my team succeeds, it's not because of me, it's because of the team. Anytime they fail, it is my fault for not preparing them the right way and not creating an environment or a circumstance that allows what I want to unfold naturally. So I like to take that full-on ownership, and I think that when you do that, your leaders and your players will follow suit in some way or another, to really step up when it's needed to step up. And that's something that's true in the business world too. I lead a team of 25 people
Hmm.
for my day job. And, when something goes wrong, we have a conversation about it. We communicate about it. And they know that they can be honest with me. They know that they can talk to me about what's really going on, not just make excuses, because I'm really there to genuinely solve the problem with them and help them get to the next level and help them succeed, opposed to direct them in a certain way of doing something that's right or wrong.
And I know sometimes as coaches that can be real difficult because we want to appear almost infallible at times, or we don't want to show that we could ever be wrong, or we don't want to show any of that like vulnerability. But I think that that really helps our players know that, and it's kind of to what you said earlier, that if we as coaches are willing to admit, our mistakes and show that vulnerability and be upfront and forthright when we're wrong, I think that it creates a culture where players then feel much better about making mistakes, and they feel that they themselves don't necessarily have to be perfect because their coaches already showed that vulnerability and showed that it's okay to admit and own up to mistakes. And I think in turn, hopefully, that'll lead to your players doing the same thing.
Yeah, I 100% agree on that. And that's really something that, I feel is huge to set. I think one of probably the most cliche overused words in the coaching world is culture. I'm going to change the culture. I'm going to create the culture, but it's so true, right? And if you don't have that environment where
Hmm.
people can feel like it's okay to fail, the only way that we grow is through failure. That's the only way, right? We learn so much more from our failures than we do from our successes. And so we need to understand what's working well, but we also need to understand what the failures are. And failures, when you can, failure is feedback. I had a mentor one time say that failure is feedback. That's all it is. It's,
Hmm.
we look at, when you look at like science and medicine, you look at the scientific method. Well, the scientific method is based on a hypothesis. And the whole point, the whole way you prove a hypothesis right is by proving every other option wrong. And
Hmm.
so when we do that with we can do that with the scientific method, and everybody thinks it's the most amazing thing in the world. But when it comes to our real life or daily life or sports, it's not acceptable anymore for some reason. And
Yeah.
that's the way that we grow, and that's the way that we understand what we're doing is right. There's another great book out there, a couple great books by Josh Medcalf, Chop Wood, Carry Water, Pound the Stone, and those are our team mantras. And we have team contracts, we have captains credos, I have a coach's commitment, all that I sign and the team signs at the beginning of each season. And it talks about, look, failure is inevitable. We're going to win games, but we're also going to lose. We're going to screw stuff up. And what I care more about with the team is what they're learning in the midst of those failures and who they become through the process of winning and losing, more so than I do the actual wins and losses that stack up on the record books.
That's so funny because I was just talking to a guest who was just like, they were talking about their practices, and they were just like, we better be failing. We better be failing all the time in
That's
practice and
awesome.
making mistakes and everything like that. Otherwise, we're not growing. We're not learning anything, right? If you're always having success in that sort of environment, like your practices are 100% successful and 100% clean, then it's like, well, what are you doing then? Like, because I don't
Yeah.
think they're getting better if they're always being successful. You need to kind of push them to that uncomfortable, right? And being comfortable with making mistakes and everything. So yeah, no, I 100% agree. Um, Switching into the topic about player nutrition, as you mentioned, you're a certified nutritionist, so that's kind of where I want to start. And I wanted to start with the communication aspect about the importance of nutrition to our players. I think as coaches, we try to mention it, or we bring it up, or we talk about eating right and staying hydrated and all of that stuff. But I don't know if maybe we're as effective as we can be about communicating that message. So I wanted to ask you, how do you have that conversation and begin to approach that topic with your players?
Yeah, and that's a huge one. And part of it is like anytime you're trying to like drop some amazing knowledge bomb that you think is next level and it's going to change lives, right? There has to be the environment where people are ready to hear it and receive it too, right? And so and that's sometimes hard, and I think a lot of it again is consistency, and also explaining the why, right? So again, coaching girls basketball, I probably focus more on why on certain things than I do on anything else. Because I find that buy-in comes more so when the players understand, okay, this is why I'm doing this. This is why we're doing this drill. This is why we're learning this skill, and practicing it over and over. And so, understanding the why is really a big deal And so I look at it, use the cliche analogy of a car. If our body is a machine, it genuinely is a machine. Or even gardening, right? Sometimes that works well. If they have parents or family members, or they themselves are farmers or whatever, and they garden or they grow anything, you know, or, or even in some of the affluent areas, you live in a homeowners association and dad's out there with the fertilizer, 8 times a year, and
Yeah,
mowing the lawn and watering it,
yeah,
14
yeah,
times a day or whatever else.
yeah. Cutting with the scissors, the grass or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly, the perfect manicure thing so that they can, impress their fake friends across the street. And I live in a homeowners association, so I'm guilty of it too. But the it's the same thing. We put so much effort into plants to grow them. We put so much effort into keeping our cars fueled appropriately. We change the oil, we put the right gas in it. And oftentimes we don't do that with our body. And our body, we are a molecular biological being, right? Our cellular metabolism functions based on macronutrients and micronutrients, which are the vitamins and minerals that we get from the food that we eat. And so the way that our body actually processes energy, and the
Hmm.
way that it works with what's called the ATP to ADP cycle, which is adenine triphosphate and adenine diphosphate. I know I'm getting really
I
biochemically
like it.
annoying, right? But this is the nerd out we talked about before, right? So here it comes. So what happens is there's certain molecular structures in our body that react in the presence of water, which is why it's important to drink water. So the oxidation of what produces energy to move us forward is when that ATP, adenine triphosphate, three phosphate molecules, one of the phosphate molecules through an osmosis process breaks off from the other two, and it releases energy. Okay. Um, the way that our body works is based on the first law of thermodynamics, and I work in energy, so this is like right
Hmm.
up that alley too. And what the first law of thermodynamics says is that energy cannot be created or destroyed; it's only transferred from one thing to another. All right, so we have these molecular compounds in our cells, in the mitochondria of our cells. And in the presence of water, what happens is those three phosphate molecules will break off into one individual phosphate, and then the adenine diphosphate, which is an adenine with a ribose attached to two phosphates. And when that break happens, it releases energy. And that's the energy that is used to move us forward. So anytime I'm moving my arms when I'm talking now, because I'm Dutch, I talk with my hands. Anytime we're running up and down the basketball court, anytime we're walking up and down the street, anytime we're talking, anytime we're blinking, anytime we're awake, that is the energy that is moving us forward. Now, when our body recovers, what happens is that adenine diphosphate structure binds with another phosphate to form that ATP again. And that phosphate and that energy is then absorbed, and that's what comes from our food. So it's this circular cycle that goes around and around and around. And in order for our body to be able to have the energy, we need to fuel it the right way with the right things.
Hmm.
And so, kind of breaking down how that works for people. Sometimes I get the glazed over eyes, which is probably half of your audience right now. So I apologize for that. But the other half that may be interested in this, this is essentially how cellular metabolism works. And so our body initially will use carbohydrates, simple carbohydrates, for the first fast fuel sources that it needs when we're doing a very intense workout. And then it will transition into fats to fuel us for sustained workouts. So we need the blend of everything. And then when we're just chilling after the workouts or whatever else, and the body's trying to repair itself, that's when it uses the proteins. And the proteins will build us back up. It will help us with some neurocommunication, with some different cellular communication. And so, understanding basically that we were created as intensely complex machines. And in order for that machine to operate at its highest capacity, we need to make sure that we're putting the right stuff into it. And, water and the right nutrients and the right feeding, so to speak, is extraordinarily important. And it's a conversation that I try not to drop all in one huge knowledge bomb like I just did
I
right there.
imagine for teenagers, they would just be staring at you, eyes wide open,
No,
or
yeah, they kind of hate it. But when they're breathing heavy, right,
Mhm.
or when they're at a free throw line and they're trying to regain their breath, and I tell them to breathe in deep through their nose and expand their stomach, hold it in for a second, and then release, to get their heart rate down. What I do is I take those little moments and I explain the why of those little moments and what's going on in their body. And that's how I'm able to do it. So when everybody's bent over, huffing and puffing and all these other things, or when they're sweating like crazy, hey, Savannah, you know why you're sweating so hard? Hey, you know why this is
Mm.
happening? Hey, you know why you're so warm
Yeah.
right now? All of these different things.
While
Or
they're
if
going
somebody,
through it. Yeah.
yeah, while they're going through it, and take those little moments to teach very small vignettes or snippets in 30 seconds to a minute. Um, and pre-game, prior to games, I always send out just little different recommendations on things too, both individually and as a team, to all the players. I do that pre-game and post-game, just to remind them and give them little reminders on things that are important. Maybe they listen to it, maybe they don't. But it also goes back to, again, like I said, creating the circumstance. Your players need to want to hear and understand that information. So I always ask permission first. Like, do you guys want me to teach you throughout the season how to operate at the highest level? Do you guys want me to share with you some of the things I've learned that will help you continue to be able to uh, play hard through all 4 quarters? Do you guys want that? Yeah, of course. Awesome. Then I'm going to do that if that's okay
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
once in a while, you know?
Right. So it's like uh, you're making sure that like your audience, in this case the players, like are ready and willing to receive that information, because I think, and I'll let you kind of speak to this. I'm pretty confident our players want to be healthy, right? They want to
Yeah.
be improving physically, they want to be in good shape, but there's so much just information, good, bad, or otherwise, out there that like they don't even know where to start. And I think that to have somebody as a coach who they trust to be the one who kind of guides them through that process is huge, to really like be like, okay, like I want to get better at this, I want to become healthier, and I have this person who I trust, who I will listen to, who will communicate this to me correctly, and tell me what I need to know.
Yeah, nobody wants to get embarrassed in front of their friends and family by somebody, right? Like I saw that, I can't remember who posted it. Somebody on Twitter or on Instagram. It was either Gino or it was like Coach Hines or something, but it was a meme that said, always remember right now somebody somewhere is training and practicing so that they can embarrass you in front of your friends and family. Right, like that
Yeah.
that and that's true, right? And nobody wants that. Nobody's going to answer, yes, I want to be embarrassed, yes, I want to be beat off the dribble, yes, I want to feel like I'm going to die in the middle of the third quarter. And so it's about just making sure that, again, you continuously get that buy-in, and it's not just one time, right? It needs to happen
Mhm.
every single time, every single practice. Hey, you guys want me to give you guys some tips on how to have the best energy this practice? Yeah, absolutely. Or no, no, and nobody's really going to say no, right? But in the
Mhm.
same respect, like, it's getting that buy-in, getting that activity, getting that engagement. Raise your hand if you want to learn how to be, better conditioned for the next game. Or asking questions like, who felt that they were a little bit out of their element, in the third quarter when they went on that 10-0 run? Who felt discouraged? Who felt tired? How many people want to feel better next game? Making sure that you're setting up that stage and getting that buy-in so that you have the open door to be able to do those little coaching
Mhm.
moments, and some of these other things.
Yeah, no, 100%. As I kind of alluded to, there's so much out there information wise when it comes to player health, nutrition, conditioning, all that stuff. And of course, there's a lot of junk out there as well, so to speak. And I wanted to ask you about any myths or misconceptions that you think are being preached about when it comes to diet or nutrition? Or what are some things that are either outdated, harmful, or just otherwise incorrect that is floating out there that you see?
I think, and again, another awesome question. Thank you for asking it. I think that in the days of social media where anybody can have the stage and anybody can have the platform, it's important to remember that anytime the little sponsored ads come up across your Facebook feed, your Instagram feed, your Twitter feed, it means that somebody is either being paid or paying money to get you information directly. They have targeted you to specifically preach some sort of message. So it reasons to believe that that message may be in that person's best interest who's delivering it and not necessarily in your best interest. There's all the fads out there. There's, well, if you're not doing low carb, you're wrong. If you're not doing low fat, you're wrong. I heard something recently that protein was evil, and that's just ridiculous, right? Like it just doesn't matter, right? Like somebody's getting paid to tell you something. Um, and so it's important to do your own research, I think, on it. I think that really ultimately the three macronutrients of protein, carbs, and fat are necessary for our diets. Ironically, carbs are probably the only thing that we don't have the essential need for our body to continue to function, but they are extraordinarily convenient when we're operating at a high level. And so we really do want to have healthy carbohydrates in our diet. I think that the buzz and the myth around potentially high fructose corn syrup is a little bit overblown. But that doesn't mean go and drink a whole bunch of Coca-Cola, right? Or
Yeah.
or do all those other things, or like just drink syrup. Like that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is understand why somebody might be trying to preach that message to you. Ultimately, at the end of the day, your body for an elite athlete, if you're trying to build muscle, you're looking at about 1.6 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram uh, of body weight in order to maintain and build muscle when you're highly active. And, carbs and fat are really needed as a blend in the midst of that. The RDAs, the recommended dietary allowances or allotments or whatever they're called, those are recommendations, by the government to be safe. But I think that sometimes those proportions aren't necessarily in line with what an elite athlete is really going to need. You need to make sure that you have enough protein to refrain from injury, so that protein muscle synthesis can continue, that the collagen synthesis, which is one of the amino acids in your body, to be able to work on your joints and different things along those lines. That's 100% needed. So don't cut the protein out of your diet. Um, the fat is necessary. Don't drop below 50 grams of fat per day in your diet. Doing that is going to open up hormonal imbalances, which, quite honestly, our endocrine system is the thing that controls all of our systems, how our hormones are released, that either trigger hunger, that trigger the testosterone or estrogen, or any of the different reactions, the millions of different reactions that our body has to things. That system gets out of whack when we don't have the right micronutrients in our diet. And then carbs, again, when our body needs that energy immediately, carbohydrates are the main source of fuel for our brain, of glucose for our brain. So when we're feeling a little bit sluggish, having some fruit or having some complex carbs, or even just some simple carbs, like I said, some fruit, bananas, berries, pineapple, things like that, that can really help us get a little bit more of a clear head. And it also, it stores in our muscles as glycogen, which prevents our muscles from breaking down or having that protein breakdown where we end up losing that muscle mass. So we need all of the things. So you never want to eliminate one macronutrient from your diet. And I personally believe that the micronutrients, which there are about 30 essential micronutrients, those are the vitamins and minerals. The only one that we don't need to consume of the 30 from our food and our diet and our supplements is vitamin D. And that's because we get it from the sun.
Mm.
And we still need to consume a certain amount of that. And if we're not having the right balanced diet that includes, a lot of fruits and vegetables and, also the essential minerals that we can get and some of our protein sources, we're putting ourselves at a disadvantage to somebody who has studied through that and really truly understands what it takes to operate at that high level. So I would say that anytime somebody is saying, this is the secret, or this is this is what's going to get you high performance, right? It doesn't matter who it is. I don't care
Yeah.
if it's Joe Rogan. I don't care if it's, I don't care if it's a former sports star, if it's a current sports star. I don't care if it's a college athlete that you admire. Remember, they can be sponsored now. One of my favorite, a personal friend of mine, and I'm not going to say their name, they just got a McDonald's sponsorship, right? And so they were on social media, talking about, how McDonald's has made their food tastier. That's an elite college athlete, right?
Yeah.
That's not necessarily a health endorsement, but that is a paid endorsement. And
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
they do that? Like it's great. I'm all about it. I'm 100% for our college athletes getting the same looks that professional athletes do and making money that way with their name. I think they put a lot of work in, and I think they should absolutely do that. But we need to take it with a grain of salt and understand that anytime anything like this happens, there is an incentive for that person to be telling you that. So it's important to do your own research and really know where to go to get that research and understand what the I'm going to say what the science is behind it, but also what the science isn't behind it, because
Mm-hmm.
science can be skewed too. When you see a new study published or this or that, right? Anytime you have a supplement company's website or sales page, they're going to tell you about all the studies and white papers that they put out on their specific supplements and this and that. But how those studies are structured and how those studies are actually done is what is skewing those results in
Yeah.
one way or the other.
And how, I know sometimes how they're funded too, or who's
Oh
supporting
yeah.
them, right? Right. Yeah, so and that's I think that's a big that's a big misconception, right? If you hear this term like study or research, that is such a vague term that it
Yeah.
doesn't really mean anything, right? Like you okay, but there's you have to do a lot more critical thinking and behind that, or a lot more into that. Like the word itself may sound a certain way, but that could mean so many different things that you
Yeah.
really have to look into it. I'm for sure. And to your point too about, and I think that that kind of goes with social media in general. Anytime somebody's like telling you something or pitching something to you or trying to advertise something to you, it's like, well, but why are they? Like, what is their angle behind it? What is their motivation behind doing that? And I know. I don't know about you, but I know I'm very grateful I did not grow up as a kid or a teenager in this social media age with all of this misinformation and all of this going on, because it is incredibly difficult to try and navigate.
And the pressure too,
Hmm.
like the pressure that the kids are under right now,
Yeah.
and that's another thing that I just think, today as we're recording this, it's International Mental Health Day. I don't know when this is going to air, but the day that we're recording this, it's that this is the day where people are, focusing on the importance of mental health, and that is a component of fitness. I don't care what anybody says. I will die on that hill. That is a component of fitness. If you are not mentally prepared and emotionally prepared to be able to operate at a high level, you're just simply not going to. And I think that people who don't, and players who don't put a focus on, their mental health the right way and don't open themselves up to the failure is feedback sort of mentality, they're putting themselves at a disadvantage to those who are willing to say and be vulnerable and really get the ego out of the way. Like we mentioned it before, like as coaches, sometimes we don't want to have the perception that, hey, I could be wrong. But, I mean, just ask any parent, you're wrong every day, right?
Hmm.
And so it's one of those things where, you need to get that ego out of the way and really truly understand, there's everybody is fighting a battle right now, this very moment that we know nothing about. And so every kid, every player, every individual that we come in contact with, I always try to look to leave like a net plus residue on them, right?
Yeah, I like
What
that.
can I do to make their life just a little bit better, regardless of what it is, whether it's basketball, whether it's, schoolwork, whether they just, maybe their family member, their brother, their cousin, or somebody else had something cool that happened in their life, right? Get to know your players in a way where you can have an impact on their lives and be that net plus person, leave that net plus residue, no matter what the scenario is.
Yeah, it's just so much, like I said, I think just in general, so much out there, so much pressure, and it's just a real difficult time, I think, with social media and everything. But going back to what we spoke about earlier, I think for our players to have a coach that they trust, who
Yeah.
can, be a voice, like, okay, like there's all this information, all this stuff out there, but I know that I trust my coach, and what he or she says about this certain topic is something I'm gonna have a lot more believability in than maybe something I'll see on like social media or something like that. But yeah, a lot out there for sure. Misconceptions and otherwise. Um, Being a coach, I know that you want to help push your team to be in the best shape possible and push them to their fullest potential. But of course, you also have to keep in mind their health, and making sure that they're physically and mentally fit as well. And I wanted to ask about how you kind of strike that balance between, pushing them to their limit and pushing them to their fullest potential, while also keeping an eye on making sure that they're being healthy and rested at the same time.
Yeah, that's huge. And that is a really difficult balance sometimes to strike, especially in, you know, and sometimes in high school we think that, we're in the best shape of our lives and we're not. And we think that, we can't assume that all of our players are going to be created equal physically, mentally, and emotionally. And there are some players who, are great players, but again, they've mentally been beat down by previous coaches, previous situations, or whatever else, where, if you're trying to push them to a certain level physically, that is going to take an emotional toll, right?
Yeah.
Our brains are registering through that physical exertion and that physical effort. We have a lot of hormones that are being released in our bodies when that happens, and sometimes you can become emotionally overwhelmed in the midst of that too, and just break down. And so, I think that, we make physical fitness a part of every single practice. We have a mental strength time. The first half hour, 20 minutes, half hour of every practice, we talk and we read together, as a team.
Okay.
And then after that, we go in, we start doing conditioning, and we look at, the warm up that I described, or mentioned to you just briefly, and then, get some different ball handling and some different full court stuff in. But we're also doing strength and agility drills with, ladder work. We're doing TRX work. We're doing, different type of plyometric work, in some cases high intensity interval training work, where they're going through stations and doing different things, always holding on to a basketball. Don't let me beat that basketball out of your hand. If you drop the basketball, you're in trouble, right? Be strong with the basketball, because really what we're trying to accomplish in the midst of that is having your brain be able to operate when you're physically exhausted. So
Yeah.
I want to wear people down to a certain extent. I don't want to break them, but I want to wear them down to the point that once we get into our shooting and our scrimmaging and our actual learning of the plays, they're already tired. They're already exhausted, because then the coaching and the importance, they understand what I'm talking about when I talk about mechanics and fundamentals at that point. Because there comes a point in a game where you're gonna have to have instincts take over as a player.
Yeah.
Your body is gonna have to move and react based on what it's trained to do 10,000 times. That's where mastery comes from. It's not doing 5 free throws, 10 free throws, is doing 10,000 free throws and making 10,000 free throws. It's not going through movement 1, 10, 15, 20 times. It's 10,000 times. That's how many times scientifically it takes to, quote, master something. And so your body needs to be able to respond and react and do those types of things when you can't even think about it. And that is, in some cases, the point of running them through a lot of those drills and a lot of that intensity at the beginning of practice is because they then go into some of the other stuff that we're doing when they're already tired, which is when it's going to be most important to execute during a game, right? Now, it's not always the case at the beginning of the season when we're learning stuff, but as we get better at stuff, then I really want to push them in the middle of the season and towards the end of the season to really exhaust themselves. And if they can exhaust themselves and still execute in the midst of practice, then that means that they're going to be able to do it on the court. And that's what's really, truly important. You know, we want to make sure that we break ourselves down in practice, like you were talking about with that other coach. You know, we got to screw up in practice. We have to find the breaking points. Yeah, we got to find the breaking points in practice and get to that point. But you know, I always want to make sure that they're getting enough oxygen for their body to recover, to be able to go through. But they also need to remember to be completely fueled when they're coming to practice. You know, if they're not drinking water all day, that little bit of water that they're taking in through our 2-hour practice isn't going to do nothing for them. If they're not, you know, taking in an adequate amount of, you know, carbohydrates for fuel, and fats for fuel, healthy fats for fuel throughout the course of the day, they're not going to have enough energy to get through the practice. And that's really what opens the door up for the injuries. It's not necessarily how hard you're pushing yourself. It's that your body doesn't have the fuel to be able to metabolize and work at a high level and hum on through. And so when that doesn't happen, it is going to stop you if you don't stop it. And that's when things start to break. Is when it doesn't have the appropriate fuel to be able to continue to go through. I mean, you look at, you know, some of these ultra marathoners and some of these people who have literally trained their body to run 100 miles at a time, multiple days in a row. You know, that's insane. I can never imagine doing that, but they're doing that, you know, 30, 40, 50, 60 years old sometimes. I mean, that, you know, I know like less than one person personally who could do that. And so but those people are out there and they're putting their body through those extreme conditions. And it's the same with military individuals, right? They put their body through extreme conditions and they train, you know, for those extreme conditions. So there definitely is a balance because you never want to, especially in travel ball, the best way to, you know, get school coaches mad at you is to injure their players in the off season. And so you definitely don't want to do that. And so you want to have that healthy balance, which is why, again, I think it's so important to train in some of that strength and conditioning, that flexibility. You know, the practices after game days, we do, again, yoga warm-ups, you know, dynamic stretching warm-ups, different things like that. And that is probably the least intense day of the week. And that's sometimes, I mean, we've played 3, 4 games, 5 games, sometimes the day before. It's not like we're just playing one game. We're playing, you know, 3 or 4 games. And sometimes those games are spread out. We'll have a game at 9 o'clock and a game at 11 o'clock. And then we'll have, you know, it'll be 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon until we play the 4th and 5th games of the round robin. And then we'll come back the next day on a Sunday and play the actual tournament. And so you have 2 days where it's just high intensity. You know, and that's why it's so important leading up to that to make sure of that tolerance to be able to be strong and to be agile. So to me, it's not just about running line drills all day long and up and down the court. Like that has its place, right? That's good for your cardio, but that's not good for your strength. And it's not good for actually building the joints and building the muscles up. You're probably almost going to see more injuries that way and stress fractures and things like that way, you know, just by doing straight cardio work on a hard court up and down with an unprepared body than you are if you do, you know, different strength things, different, you know, weight room type stuff and so on and so forth. I mean, a lot of the colleges now, as they're in their preseasons, they're posting, you know, you see all the posts about the weight rooms. If you're in high school and you're not working out in the weight room and you're not taking advantage of your school or your club organization strength and agility trainings or your weight room trainings, you are going to be in for a rude awakening once you get to that college level, because that
Yeah.
is part of your day.
Yeah, and I've talked to, and right to your point, I've talked to quite a few people who played in college, and even some athletes who are currently in college, and they say that that was kind of the biggest shift they had to make with their body is being in the weight room, and that they were so lucky for some of the coaches who actually gave them that exposure in high school, because they knew of like teammates of theirs who didn't have that exposure and how difficult it was for them to adjust to something like the weight room. So yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that as high school coaches, we got to make sure our players are in there, because if we want them to play at the next level, like you said, they're going to have to become friends with that weight room really quick.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah, and also to your point, I remember when I first started coaching, especially, I would have these drills that we would do, or these things that we would go through in practice that would look really good in practice, and then I found in a game situation we did not execute those well or to the way that like we should have, and I think one of the big reasons for that was because our players were not practicing and simulating kind of how they would actually feel in a game. I think it's one thing to
Mhm.
kind of run through some sets or run through some drills or some actions you want when everyone's pretty fresh and pretty good to go, but then to actually have them do that in a game when they're going to be in a much different physical state. I think to your point, like if we can get our players in practice kind of to that state that they would be in a game, then we can actually really see kind of the stuff that they learn, and the way that they're able to execute by really pushing them to that point in practice.
Yeah, game speed is no joke. Like if you're a coach and not preaching game speed in practice, I think you're putting your kids at a disadvantage, because somebody else is training at game speed. And I think that that's the hardest thing, and why, skill development younger and younger and younger is so important.
Hmm.
And advanced skill development younger and younger and younger is so important, because if you can't start doing that stuff at speed in the midst of a game, it's there, it exists. Not only do we have people who are 16 years old shooting and making it from 25-30 feet now,
Yeah.
we also have people who are able to pull off multi-directional moves at the speed of light, and leave you in the dust, because they've trained it
Yeah.
so hard over and over and over again. The game has evolved so much since I played 20 years ago, 25 years ago, that we as coaches, it's not just about doing mic and drills anymore. It's not just, and I love the mic and I still have my kids do it every single time. It's
Yeah.
not, but it's not just about those basic drills anymore. We have to get some more of that advanced training in, that you see a lot of these professional players do. And it's only going to serve our kids better if they can start to get their brain to work in multiple different directions at the same time, because that's what is going to have to happen in a game. Mental blocks are as common as physical blocks in the midst of a game.
Yeah, no, I like the way that you worded it. I completely agree. The last question before we hit our concluding segment, and again, this is incredible how quickly time flies by when we're
Oh my
talking about
gosh.
something as important as this. I want to ask you about what um, habits do you think coaches could be building into their practices, or even before practices, or just as part of their program in general? What sort of habits do you think we as coaches can maybe start incorporating to keep our players' health and fitness in mind, and make sure that we're building those healthy habits intentionally within our program?
So I think, some of the higher level coaches and some of the higher level programs, they have the luxury at the college level of having, team nutritionists or department nutritionists and department physical therapists and trainers like on call all the time, which is awesome. And I would encourage, coaches to definitely push their players in that direction. And again, the biggest thing, the difference between a guest and a pest is an invitation, right?
I
And
like that.
so if we don't get I read it somewhere. I can't take credit for it. I don't know exactly
That's
where
what
I
we do
read
as coaches, though. We take everything. So,
it. That's right.
and all good.
That's right. And really the difference, and to build on that, the difference between, correction and criticism is a desire to help. And so if we have an invitation and a desire to help, and we get permission for those things, and we have that trust built up, that really gives us free reign to really be able to start implementing the things that we learn that we're so passionate about. Because as
Mhm.
coaches, it's not like we're trying to have this ego trip. We're just super passionate about the things that we believe are correct. And we want to create those clones and those mini me's and those people who also love the things that we love as much as we love them. And, when we have the invitation and when we have the trust, then, we can really build on helping that individual, develop individualized plans, because it is individualized. The same diet plan doesn't work for everybody. The same strength training plan doesn't work for everybody. There are certain exercises that you can do with everybody, but if you have people who are super long, for example, like if you have a team of, people who, your front court and your back court ranges from the 5'9s to the 6'2s, and then you jump
Mhm.
from 6'5 to 7 foot. Like and those are two completely different training regiments that you need to put people through to get similar results. And so, understanding that there's individualized stuff that people need, but there's also common knowledge that people need, and educating yourself and being able to then take those little coaching moments after you ask permission and get that buy-in to help people understand and start integrating that type of stuff in is huge. And I briefly mentioned this beforehand, but uh, usually after every practice, I'll send a team message out to the entire team in a group text. We always have group text, group Instagram chats, group
Mhm.
Snapchats, right? The whole thing. And I'll also send individualized messages out. Obviously tell the parents I do this so they know. There's open and honest communication, and I always let the parents know anytime you want to know what I'm talking to your kid about. If they don't tell you, definitely ask them. But I'll happily share, the message strain and everything else with you. Um, but I try to send group texts and then individual texts both before and after every single game, so that the team feels, okay, these are the team things that we need to focus on. And I'm part of this team. I'm part of this family. We're brothers and sisters in the midst of this. But then there also is that individual attention as well of, hey, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm observing. Can I share with you some things that I feel might be able to help you? If they say yes, boom, I go into
Mhm.
it. If they're not into it, that's cool too, right? That's perfectly fine. But that also gives me the feedback on, well, what am I not doing to communicate things the right way? What can I do to grow as myself as a coach to be able to open up the doors to be able to, better communicate these things? So I think that incorporating the vulnerability, going on a journey with them so they know that they're not in the midst of doing this alone, or they don't feel like it's alone, it's a thing that they're doing alone. And then really giving sort of the individual attention in addition to the team attention as it relates to fitness, health and wellness, whatever else, and offering to help. Like,
Yeah.
I have players that in between, our practices, in between our sessions, or they'll, all of my players, I always make it a point to, obviously early's on time is late. That's a
Yep.
big coach's cliche.
Of
But
course.
I'll have players that'll, I'll offer even before they get there, the 20, 30 minutes early, like, hey, let's meet for 10, 15 minutes before that. Let's just work on some things. Let me show you what's happening. Let me show you what you're specifically doing, and offering and being available to do that one-on-one stuff, I think, is really what has that high impact. And again, that's not a reality for all coaches, but
Sure.
bringing it to more of a personal level, I think, is something that can really, really help that mindset, or what you're trying to communicate, sink in, because it's not about us, it's about our players, right? Our
Mhm.
organization is only as good as our players. And so, regardless of how great we are, or how great we think we are, or how great somebody told us we were one time, that one time, right? How great somebody told us we were that one time, that doesn't matter. It's what our players are able to take from us and then, go forth and prosper with.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. And I think that it's a really good reflection tool though about if like and you kind of mentioned like if the message isn't quite getting across, kind of even just like thinking about like what could I maybe like have done maybe to like communicate that in a different way or like
Hmm.
have done in a way that kind of gets through and not like as you mentioned, right? Not trying to keep pushing the issue if somebody isn't willing to listen or somebody isn't paying attention, but just kind of think like I know that this was important, and I think that this person could really, benefit from something I'm going to instruct them or say to them. But what could I have done to better communicate that, or look for ways to get the importance of that message across more? I think that that's a really good like reflection tool to really think on because, you know, as coaches, of course, we want our players to trust us and believe us and listen to us as well as their family members as well. And I think that it's easy to get defensive. I think sometimes when people don't want to hear our message, right, or we take it
Yeah.
personal or get offended by it. But I think reframing it as like how could I have done that better and make sure the next time I want to have this conversation it goes in a better direction is probably a much healthier way to approach that sort of thing.
Yeah, I like to think so. It's not always the case. At least it doesn't
Not
seem
always
like
easy.
that immediately, right? Yeah, immediately it seems like it's the most difficult thing in the world. But I think long term, if we're really looking at building those long-term relationships and having that long-term impact, uh, you know, approaching things differently is huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Coach, to wrap up, there's a couple questions I ask every guest. I'll go ahead and start with this first one, which is thinking back on your coaching career, what is a moment from your coaching career that you think others listening would be able to learn from?
Can I share a failure with you guys?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. I love sharing failures, even if it makes me look like a bit of an idiot. But and that is the case right here. So I had my team captain get injured day one of a 2-day tournament, and she was diving on the ball for or diving on the floor for a loose ball, and she ended up injuring her shoulder. Someone came down on top of her. It was a bit of a chronic injury, and so she couldn't play on Sunday. And Sunday we had a winnable game, a very very winnable game. And the day before, I had gotten on my players a bit in the first half, and at halftime I sat them down and I'm just like, "You girls know I love you, right? Like this is not personal." And they laughed and it lightened the mood. And then one of them said, "I think you should yell at us more. It makes me play better." Well, I took that to mean that it's going to make everybody play better, and not that individual. And so, what I realized the next day when I decided to get a little bit more animated and get a little bit more engaged and vocalizing some of my opinions on things is that my team captain, who I had given permission to, get more vocal with on the team, as she was, she could contribute by being sort of an honorary coach. I realized that she was just mimicking the frustration that I had. And
Hmm.
what it really taught me was that, like, I had realized that she was being overly critical on stuff and, overly frustrated with the team on not going after rebounds, not going after loose balls. But that was the same stuff that I had said, 30 seconds earlier, a few plays earlier. And so she was more just mimicking me and mimicking my actions and my reactions to this situation in this game, which again, it was a winnable game and we should have won, and we hung with it the entire time and we gave it away. And when that type of stuff happens as a coach, it's really, really hard to keep your head in a lot of situations, right?
Yeah.
You get frustrated, you get angry. Um, but there's a way to communicate that and there's a way to engage with that. And what was happening is it was really just crushing the soul of the team, because it's one thing if I do it, it's another thing if the captain does it and is following suit. And so what I did later on that night is, we had a conversation, me and that individual, and I just said, "Look, I failed you, and I failed you even though you didn't play this entire time by being a poor example for how you should lead your team." And, even though this works with individuals, it doesn't work with everybody. And I had a lot of makeup to do that, after that game. I had a lot of individual conversations to have, a lot of texts to have, a lot of you have free reign to give me feedback as your coach, as your friend, as somebody who has, chosen to lead your team from a coaching perspective. You are a player on my team and you're an important part of this team. We're a family. You have free reign to be able to do that. And some of the girls were great. They were like, you know what, I was frustrated too, but I didn't mind the way you talked. I didn't mind the way you yelled. I didn't mind the feedback you gave. Other girls were like, I thought I was trying really, really hard. And when you did that, it completely crushed me. And that really, it really reinforced to me that no matter what you think you're doing, whether it's good or bad, right or wrong, you need to understand that there's people watching you, and there will be people who follow your lead, especially as a coach and especially as a leader. And so it really gave me sort of a gut check and an ego check in the midst of it, and really reinforced the fact that, yes, I'm coaching a team, but I'm also coaching a group of individuals. And all of those individuals are going to react differently. And so I had to have a conversation with the two team captains who were sort of going back and forth at each other and were at each other's throats in the midst of that game, the one who was injured and then the other one who was on the floor. And we had to have, our kumbaya moment before the next practice and just be like, all right, is everybody good? Where are we at here? And I apologize to them for setting a poor example. My injured team captain apologized for coming down too hard and apologized to the entire team. And so we really, we got through it, and that's what good teams do. And that's what good families do, is they get through it. They have conversations and they get through it. But if the biggest thing that I learned from that I think other coaches can learn from is that your team is watching everything you do. And they're going to feed off of everything you do. They're going to feed off your energy, positive or negative. They're going to feed off your feedback, positive or negative. And they're going to feed off your communication style, positive or negative. If you don't want your team to yell at each other on the court, don't yell at them from the sidelines. Yell encouragement, but don't yell at them. Don't critique them from the sidelines in a way that is going to bring them down and break their spirit. And this is maybe more prevalent with girls basketball than guys basketball, just because of the difference in how they react, but have individual conversations with them, and have those individual moments of, all right, tell me what you're seeing, tell me what you're understanding, how are you seeing the game, how's it flowing, and what is your biggest struggle right now, and just shut up and let them talk, and then use that as feedback to be able to coach them and communicate the exact same thing you would want to say if you were yelling and screaming at them. And so it really put me in check when I realized, like, I don't want my team captain doing this. And if I don't want my team captain doing that, I shouldn't be doing it myself.
And I think it's one of those things too, where it's like if you're going to open yourself up to that, to letting your players talk, like you better be listening to it, right? You better be taking that to heart, whatever it is that they say, because they will be honest with you, right? They will tell you. And I imagine in your situation, when you had that was a long process of regaining trust, I imagine, and
Oh yeah.
trying, and I know for me, being in similar situations before, you just want to like hurry up that healing process and like try and get it done as quickly as you can to move on. But like something like that, I imagine, like that had to be a very long, very ongoing process. There is no like quick fix to something like that, for sure.
No, and you gotta remember that when you make that type of bed, you got to sleep in it for a while, and you need to be a part of the pain and the frustration and the sadness that goes along with it. And it just takes more and more conversation, and it takes different opportunities to rebuild that trust. I mean, the team that always engaged, always talked back and forth, always was super excited. And I called the parents individually too after that incident, and I got their feedback. And I just said, hey, I owe you an apology for this, for that. And some parents were like, one of the parents played basketball at Penn State. She's like, oh, you were fine, and so she had no problem with it. And there were other parents who were like, I don't know that my kid's going to come back to practice. And so it's just, again, it's interesting that the full on spectrum as it goes back and forth. of what individuals need, especially at this level, especially with the pressure, and especially when you set that standard of, hey, this is the type of coach that I am. We learn through failure, we fail forward, failure is okay. And then, you get your competitive juices take over, and really the frustration is that I was frustrated that the players weren't being the best versions of themselves, that there was a better way to communicate that, and I needed to learn and grow from that situation. I'm so grateful that that situation happened to me, because no matter what happens to me, it's an opportunity to learn and grow, whether we win or whether we lose. And I lost big time, and I failed my girls in that situation. And so that's something that, I'll always tell that story and be open and honest about it, and hopefully the girls can learn and remember that too, going on through their relationships and their careers, whether it's basketball or otherwise.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. That was definitely something I think we all could learn from for sure. To wrap up, Coach, I give every guest kind of what I call a 60-second soapbox, kind of like your platform to get out kind of a final message, a closing thought, something in general that you want to leave the listeners with. You are kind of welcome to take it any direction that you wish. So I'm going to give you the floor. And if you go over 60 seconds, that's perfectly fine because I don't time anyone anyway. So I'm going to give you the floor, Coach. I'm just going to let you take it from here.
Yeah, I think that I've soapboxed the whole time, so I kind of feel bad about that, but also appreciate the opportunity. I think the biggest thing that I would want to leave people with is that it is a great privilege to do what we do, and it is an amazing responsibility to do what we do. And I love this game of basketball so much, and I'm willing to serve it as much as I possibly can. And that drove me to get better. But one of the interesting things is, it's also sort of a family thing. As coaches, if we're married, if we're in a relationship, if we have kids, they sacrifice a lot too. And I think it is extraordinarily important to remember that they're sacrificing right along with you in the midst of this. They're hurting right along with you sometimes. They don't like to see you lose. They don't like to see you frustrated. So hug your wife, thank them for, or husband, right? Thank them for being in that with you, and also listen to them when they attempt to give you feedback. Don't let your expertise as a coach in the game uh, overshadow the fact that there are things at the core that they could be saying that are 100% applicable and 100% right. So that is a huge thing. And if you coach your kid like I do, remember that you're a parent first, and that this game is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be a fun game that people can play together. And remember the joy that you had just playing in the driveway, and, seeing your kids make their first shot, and seeing your kids, you know, get it for the first time, or go through their legs and make a layup, and, all of these different things. Remember those moments. Remember those that's what it's all about. Like those instances are what it's all about. You will never ever regret making time and prioritizing your family first. And I know as coaches we often get caught up in the service to the game that we love, and sometimes that happens and we leave our family and our friends in our wake. And that's a balance that's difficult for us. And so that'll lead me into the last thing, which is do not forget to prioritize mental health. Mental health is huge. The more of a leader you are, the more of a need you have to get your own help. I see somebody on a regular basis, not as regular as I probably should with my schedule. Um, but she's an amazing therapist who also has elite athletes in her family, and understands the pressures and the challenges and the dynamic, and is able to help me troubleshoot and understand some of the things that I might be doing wrong that I can't see for myself. And so mental health is not a dirty word, especially in athletics, and mental strength comes through being able to be vulnerable and grow and learn from your mistakes, and being able to share those and understand that, we're all in this together. We're in it for our team. We're in it for the people that we're coaching. It's not, look, I coach travel basketball for a team that is not sponsored. Okay.
Mhm.
Like, I'm not in it for the money. All right. It is something that, all of the money that I get paid from the organization, it goes right back into books and journals and stuff for the team and for the girls. That's where the budget goes. So it is straight volunteer for me because I love the game. And I think sometimes we get blinded by the big business of sports and the opportunity that's out there, and we want to make a name for ourselves, but it's not about us. It's about the game, and it's about furthering that game by setting a good example for the people who are on our team, and making sure that we can be that light that they can come to and leave that net plus residue, everywhere we go. So I love this game. I am so grateful for this opportunity, Coach. Thank you so much, for putting up with me for over an hour now, and all of my babbles and all of my things.
Not putting up. No, no.
I'm really grateful, man. And this has been awesome. And I love doing this type of stuff. So, I look forward to hopefully being able to have another conversation with you again in the future.
Yeah, no, it'd be great. And I thought of the we talk about the cliches and the sayings that we take from people. And as you were talking, I thought about the old health is wealth sort
Yeah.
of saying, right? About making sure. I think to your point, right? If we're going to be leaders, we got to make sure that we are as healthy as we possibly can be, well, physically and then hopefully mentally as well, right? Find the mental health, as you said, is not a dirty word, and we want to make sure we're where we need to be for our players. I couldn't agree more. I really appreciate it, Coach. Thank you so much for spending some time sharing your knowledge, sharing the things that you know about nutrition, player health, player safety, mentally, physically, all that good stuff. Really looking forward to continuing to follow your journey and follow the things that you're doing. And best of luck, and make sure you take care of yourself, Coach, of how busy you are. Coach Dokter, really appreciate you coming on.
All right. Thank you so much for the opportunity. It was a lot of fun.
And thank you all for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.